Coming up on Network Africa, Human Rights Watch urges Niger authorities to do more to protect civilians following a deadly attack by gunmen that killed dozens. Malawi counts the votes after Tuesday's tightly contested presidential election lost. South Africa's court denies appeal by family of late Zambian President Edgar Lungu, who sought to have him buried in the country. Hello and welcome to the program. I'm Layo Olarinde. We begin in Niger, where gunmen have killed at least 22 people, most of them attending a baptism ceremony in a deadly attack on a village in the country's western region. According to reports, 15 people were killed at the ceremony in the Tillaberi region, which borders Mali and Burkina Faso, before moving elsewhere and killing 7 others. The Human Rights Watch has urged Nigerian authorities to do more to protect civilians against such deadly attacks. The Rights Monitoring Group estimates that the Islamic State group has summarily executed more than 127 villagers and Muslim worshippers in Tillaberi in 5 attacks since the month of March. Well, Niger's military government has struggled to contain jihadist violence in the region carried out by groups linked to Al-Qaeda and Islamic State. Last week, around 20 soldiers were killed in the region. In southern Africa now, Malawi has begun counting votes in a presidential election that's expected to be a tight race between old rivals that possibly could go to a runoff. Incumbent President Lazarus Chakwera is seeking a second term, and it's against his main challenger, former President Peter Mutharika, even as Malawians grapple with soaring inflation, a cost of living crisis, and critical fuel shortages. Around 7.2 million people were registered to vote in the presidential and parliamentary elections, the first held under newly drawn boundaries that expanded local areas and constituencies. 17 candidates contested the presidency, but the race is widely expected to come down to President Chakwera and former President Mutharika. The two men previously clashed in the 2019 election, which was nullified by a court due to irregularities. Then President Chakwera won a historic rerun in 2020. The election comes amid ongoing economic challenges in the country, including high inflation, drought-related farming losses, and widespread fuel shortages, all pressing issues for the electorate. We're in Ghana now, where the Foreign Affairs Minister Samuel Ablakwa has confirmed that the country has agreed to receive West African nationals deported from the United States, and it's part of an arrangement with Washington. Mr. Ablakwa stresses that under this agreement, Ghana will accept a limited number of vetted deportees and assist them in their return to their respective countries. The first group of deportees have already arrived at Accra, comprising 14 individuals from Nigeria and Gambia. Ghana has now joined a growing list of African nations accepting deportees from the United States, even as the Trump administration continues its crackdown on illegal immigration. Other African nations with similar arrangements include Eswatini, Uganda, South Sudan, and Rwanda, which they've agreed to take in up to 250 deportees.
Media engagement on 10th September 2025, His Excellency President John Dramani Mahama confirmed that Ghana has accepted some West African nationals who had been deported from the United States. Providing further elucidation, the President indicated that the U.S. government had approached Ghana with a request to receive some of these individuals, and his administration agreed to do so, provided they were nationals of West African countries. The President disclosed that the first batch of deportees, numbering 14 people, had already arrived in Accra. Among them were nationals of Nigeria and the Gambia, who have been assisted to return to their respective countries. The government of Ghana took the principled and humanitarian decision to accept the limited number of West African nationals deported from the United States under exceptional circumstances, in line with Ghana's long-standing Pan-African ideals and unwavering commitment to regional solidarity. Many of these individuals were being held in detention, which was both psychologically and physically distressing. They were also faced with the risk of being deported to countries that are not safe and do not have the stability and human rights credentials Ghana is famed for. Let me emphasize that under this understanding with the United States, Ghana must first independently vet the background of those the US intends to deport to first satisfy ourselves that they do not pose any threat to the security of our country and that they cannot harm our citizens. We have put in place strict safeguards to ensure that convicted, hardened criminals cannot be brought into our country under this understanding.
Well, staying with Ghana, President John Mahama is urging African nations to work together to build an energy sector capable of meeting development goals. He was speaking at the Africa Oil Week 2025 in Accra. President Mahama stressed that the continent's resources present an opportunity to shift from exporting raw commodities to becoming an industrialized, energy-driven hub. While echoing his point, the Ghanaian Minister of Energy and Green Transition, John Jinapor, also said Africa cannot accept an energy transition that sidelines development, exacerbating poverty and ignoring the stark energy deficiency. Mr. Jinapor noted that despite possessing more than 125 billion barrels of oil and 620 trillion cubic feet of natural gas, the continent continues to struggle with energy sufficiency.
We're made to believe that energy.
This year's theme, Creating Our Future Through the United Power of Human Intelligence, is timely because it challenges us to pool our expertise, our resources and vision to shape a sustainable energy future for Africa. Africa must take ownership of its resources and its destiny. Africa holds nearly 10% of the world's proven oil reserves and significant natural gas deposits, with a substantial portion of these resources remaining untapped. These resources present an opportunity to transform our continent from a primary exporter of raw commodities into a hub for energy-driven value addition, boosting our petrochemical potential and our industrial growth. And yet, paradoxically, more than 600 million Africans still lack access to electricity. Another 1 billion have no access to clean cooking systems. This is a gap we must urgently close if we are to achieve the African Union Agenda 2063 and the UN SDGs before 2030. This makes Africa's oil and gas reserves strategically pivotal, not just for global energy security, but also to address Africa's energy poverty.
For the African continent, which is endowed with more than 125 billion barrels of oil and 620 trillion cubic feet of natural gas, we cannot afford to continue to struggle to achieve energy sufficiency as a continent. This platform must therefore provide us with a unique opportunity to share insights, forge partnerships, and explore innovative solutions to meet our energy needs in a responsible and inclusive manner. In doing so, Africa cannot accept a transition that sidelines development, exacerbates poverty, and ignores the stark energy deficiency that still grapples the continent.
Well, let's get more on the story of, the U.S. deportees Ghana accepting U.S. deportees, West African nationals. We've now been joined by Joy News TV correspondent Maxwell Ogbagba. He joins us live from Accra. Hello, Maxwell. Thank you for joining us on the program.
Thank you for having me live.
Well, help us understand Ghana's reason for accepting, these deportees, especially where many other countries aren't.
Well, we heard from the president of Ghana, that was sometime last week when a presidential engagement was held at Ghana's presidency. And the president indeed explained that Ghana's decision to accept these West African deportees was in the spirit of Pan-Africanism and then African solidarity. He also stated that it was purely based on humanitarian grounds. And indeed, Ghana's Foreign Affairs Minister, Samuel Ethiopian, has been speaking. In fact, he spoke on Monday during a government accountability series in an address to the press. And that question also came. He also reiterated the point that the decision to accept this West African deportees was purely based on humanitarian grounds and because of Ghana's Pan-African ideas. In fact, he was very emphatic that Ghana is not getting any money from the United States of America for receiving these West African deportees. He reiterated and re-echoed the president's point that he made that these are West African nationals and their passport allows them to come to Ghana, to visit Ghana without, a visa. So really accepting them is not a big deal. But the main reason is because of Ghana's Pan-Africanism, ideals, and also based on humanitarian grounds. And he made it clear that Ghana is not receiving any money from this deal with the United States. In fact, Ghana's minority in parliament, the opposition New Patriotic Party, had stated that the decision to accept the deportees was supposed to go through parliament for parliamentary ratification. That the minister clarifies that the decision to accept the deportees still remains a memorandum of understanding. And by convention, memorandum of understandings, MOUs, are not supposed to be sent to Ghana's parliament for ratification. He said that if the decision to accept these West African nationals becomes a full-blown bilateral agreement, that is when it will be sent to parliament, for ratification. But as it stands now, it remains an MOU, a memorandum of understanding between Ghana and the United States of America. And in fact, he stated that Ghana's cabinet had discussed the issue, and the Attorney General for the country had given approval and is backing to the decision and the agreement to accept this 15 West African nationals. In fact, a question came up as to whether going forward, Ghana will accept other people outside, the West African sub-region. He clarified and stated clearly that this agreement, this memorandum of understanding, I should say, is only limited to West African nationals and not people outside the West African sub-region.
Yeah, I was going to ask that, if Ghana would be taking other people outside West Africans. But we heard the Foreign Minister, Samuel Ablakwa, also say that Ghana would not be receiving criminal elements and deportees, rather. And these people that will indeed be coming to Ghana would be subjected to security screening and background checks. What kind of, how is that supposed to play out, for especially the other deportees that Ghana will be expecting?
That was one of the biggest concerns for a lot of Ghanaians coming through comments on social media when the news came out that we agreed to accept these West African deportees. A lot of people were concerned about the background of these persons. But the Foreign Affairs Minister has been allaying fears that we will not accept people unless their background has been checked, vetted. And in fact, to use his words, he said, hardened criminals would not be accepted into the country. Indeed, in the past, Ghana accepted some Guantanamo Bay detainees who were sent here to Ghana, and that generated a lot of controversy, in the country. So, with the benefit of hindsight, with the benefit of what had happened in the past, many were raising concerns that maybe the people who be accepted would have questionable backgrounds. But the Foreign Affairs Minister has been allaying the fears of Ghanaians and saying that no person will be accepted unless their backgrounds have been vetted by Ghana's security agencies. And in fact, he stated that hardened criminals, convicted criminals, will not be accepted as part of this memorandum of understanding with the United States of America. And a lot of people are quite satisfied with that response that he gave.
All right, then, Maxwell Agbagba, Joy News TV correspondent, thank you so much for speaking to us. Well, let's take a break now on the program. Still to come. Well, Ethiopia is celebrating the new year of 2018. We'll give you more details after the break. Please join us again.
Modern lifestyle requires a lot of energy, backed up by intense production processes, which impact the environment in more ways than one.
The world has realized that you cannot deal with climate change without looking at loss of biodiversity.
On Echo Africa, nature speaks and the discerning mind becomes champion of sustainable living.
One thing we want to do is to change public behavior around recycling.
Watch Echo Africa on Channels Television and find out what nature is saying.
Welcome back to the program. South Africa's High Court has denied an appeal by the family of late Zambian President Edgar Lungu, who sought to have him buried in the country. The court ruled that former President Lungu should instead be laid to rest in his home country, Zambia. President Edgar Lungu, who served as Zambia's head of state from 2015 to 2021, died in a South African hospital in June at the age of 68 while receiving medical treatment. His family opposed his burial in Zambia, reportedly to prevent current President Hakainde Hichilema, who's been a long-time political rival, from attending or speaking at the funeral. However, the court ruled last month that the Zambian government has the legal right to bury a former head of state and should receive Lungu's remains, which are still in the South African morgue. Well, the family's appeal of that decision has now been rejected, clearing the way for the body to be returned to Zambia for burial. Well, back here in Nigeria, Lagos State remains a leader for development and innovation in the country and will lead the nation as it thrives to become a world power because it has all it takes to do so. This was the sum of Governor Babajide Sanwo-Olu's remarks as guest lecturer in the first NIIA Distinguished Lecture Series with the theme Lagos and Nigeria 2030, Projections of a World Power. Our correspondent Amarachi Ubani reports.
It's a packed auditorium at the Nigerian Institute of International Affairs, one of the major landmarks of Nigeria's history and foreign policy drivers. It is no wonder that such an important lecture will be holding here. In attendance are the Lagos State Governor, Babajide Sanwo-Olu, the Deputy Governor, Dr. Kadri Obafemi Hamzat, senior members of the ruling party in Lagos State, service commanders, traditional rulers, members of the diplomatic corps, members of the NIIA, and special invited guests. It's a packed auditorium at the Nigerian Institute of International Affairs, one of the major landmarks of Nigeria's history and foreign policy drivers. It is no wonder that such an important lecture would be holding here. In attendance today are the Lagos State Governor, Babajide Sanwo-Olu, the Deputy Governor, Dr. Kadri Obafemi Hamzat, senior members of the ruling party in Lagos State, service commanders, traditional rulers, members of the diplomatic corps, members of the NIIA, and specially invited guests. The Director General of the Institute, Professor Hossa Osaye, welcomes guests by highlighting the uniqueness of Lagos, commending Governor Sanwo-Olu for a number of firsts at the Institute.
Lagos is the heartbeat that a global power has. But most of all, Lagos has been the most blessed of all old states in Nigeria with the best forms of leadership. I'm sure that if you count back and look at what Lagos has achieved over the years, you cannot but recognize that at the core of all that Lagos has achieved is good leadership. So today, when we talk about governance and the challenges and how we are going to surmount them, we know that Lagos leads the way, and Lagos is the master of our destiny.
Chairman of the occasion, Dr. Dere Awoshika, in her remarks says the governor has directed focus on Lagos as a world power by providing security for citizens.
Lagos remains the most secured place in Nigeria. I say it with all confidence. Up till this moment, I can go out at 2 a.m. Can't you? That's what it is. And this is something we must be proudly speaking about, because without security, there's no world power. Under your leadership, with all the security problems that comes across the nations of Nigeria, Lagos remains secured.
His Excellency.
The governor takes the podium, extolling Nigeria's eminence in Africa, her efforts at realizing independence for African countries, Lagos State's vision, which fits into the national one.
The Lagos State 30-year plan has been anchored on 4 critical pillars. We want to build a thriving economy. We want to have modern infrastructure in all facets. We want to have a human-centric city in which all the global players in the world will think of a location where they can resource 500,000 tech experts. Think of Lagos, which is a human-centric city. And we also want it to be done with effective governance.
While reiterating Nigeria's growing global influence, he makes projections for a global power.
We must now give the range and the depth of our talents, our endowments, and our potential. We must fully maximize to unlock our power to the fullest, especially in those areas and areas in which we're lagging behind. We must do this while also consolidating and conquering new grounds in the spheres in which we have already demonstrated strength.
A panel discussion afterwards turned into a mini town hall in which Lagosians asked varying questions from governance to security, which was highly commended.
What it does then gives all of us opportunity, the citizenry, to talk one-on-one with our governor, to tell him about our aspirations, our areas of concern, so that he will not gather dust on the table. He will go back to his office, and we are sure actions will be taken. So please invite many more governors that if you still have a few years to go, months to go in the year, and you know we can do it.
The governor's strong projections for Nigeria will certainly outlive his tenure. But his footsteps are sure to remain at the NIIA, where he has committed to the establishment of a foreign policy school as a legacy project. Amarachi Ubani, Channel Television News.
Well, in this month of September, Ethiopia is celebrating the start of the year 2018. It's called the Meskerem 1 in the Ethiopian calendar. The country has its own calendar, That is 7 to 8 years behind the Gregorian calendar used in most of the world. Well, this is because the Ethiopian calendar is based on the ancient Coptic calendar and calculates the birth of Christ differently from the Gregorian system. Even more interesting, it has 13 months, 12 months of 30 days each, and a 13th month called Pagume, which has 5 or 6 days, and that's dependent on whether it's a leap year. Well, that has formed the crux of our Did You Know? If you didn't know, now you know. That's it on the program today. Thank you so much for watching. I'm Layo Olarinde.